Okay, I'm going to read chapter 25, and chapter 25 is all about the first anniversary of the Marine bombing in Beirut. Nobody, I mean nobody, wanted to do this. Jane and I got together, we made a prayer, we meditated, we had a plan. One of the plans was we wouldn't deal with anyone unless they volunteered, and we were just going to see how many people actually cared about what happened in Beirut. That was our bottom line. Me, I had made a promise when I laid down in the bed the day of the bombing that has affected me for the rest of my life. And you'll see it starting to take over my life from here on in. So that's my explanation. Chapter 25. Can you believe it? Rodney Square, Wilmington, Delaware, 7:30 p.m. October 23rd, 1984. Remember, the bottom line here was they would not put the Marines' names on the Vietnam Wall, and I was going bonkers because I was calling it a war and nobody else would. It was cold and drizzly and raining, wind blowing. It's too strong, it'll blow all the candles out. I had sent a copy of the Commandant's letter to me, to a local Marine Reserve officer. I'm a real grunt, and I know who runs the United States Marine Corps. So I copied the officer in charge letter to the sergeant in charge. Sergeants run the Marine Corps. He called me, and I got a secret but firm promise for a voluntary honor guard equipped for a rifle salute, even if I have to do it myself, but I can't get a band, okay? The sergeant said. Okay, and so it went. Many Vietnam vets from all the services called and offered to carry rifles and raise flags. I gave each one a job, and I was ecstatic. A city councilman called on the sly. He's an old neighbor named Joe DiPinto, who knew Pat very, very well. Our kids played together. Tommy, I have to do something. So he offered to get me a permit for using Rodney Square. A low-level former Marine City public employee who heard the councilman calling called me secretly himself an hour later and offered to set up a massive public speaker system in Rodney Square. Things were coming together all by themselves. Another city councilman, Tommy, we got a council resolution passed last night. And Jane, who hadn't been out of the house for many, many, many years, she spent almost 60 years in a wheelchair. She made the phone calls, and I barely lifted a finger. Wow, Tommy, she said, it's really happening. I would love to go to the event, she said wistfully. A DuPont union official I nicknamed Jimmy the Sea overheard this comment from Jane and volunteered to load her up and take her in a van. They drove downtown early and wheeled her up on the platform. Wheeled her up to the platform someone in the Public Employees Union had set up for the event. Everything was done by volunteers. We didn't even know about it. The very first face to appear, Big Joe the Teamster, grinning, beaming, lurking in the dark, pointing at the camera, saying, shh, with his finger to his lips and both of us laughing. The tension broke. Then I looked over under the trees, and there he was, lurking in the rain. Bill Frank, also in a wheelchair, and a breathing machine attached to his side, tubes in his nose. He had a bad case of emphysema. He was very, very ill. He was pushed to the service by his wife. I was truly impressed. It was almost 7 o'clock on a dark and dreary night. He was sick as hell. Talk about a warrior. This guy couldn't be stopped. Trickles of folks began showing up. A rabbi, what do I do? A priest, what do I do? A minister, what do I do? And a Protestant mother, what do I do? I instructed everyone who came and was present. It's your show. I'm going to introduce each of you in the rotation that you arrive. I will tell the audience why you're here, and I'll sign off. Then you speak from your heart. At the very end, we will light a candle for peace and listen to a song on a guitar. Kay and the kids were really worried about me. I could feel their embarrassment for me. The candles won't stay lit, they warned. No one will come, they warned. Suddenly, Philadelphia TV cameras were glaring. Suddenly, local radio stations were whispering. Suddenly, national news reporters and photographers were prowling. Suddenly, they were all coming from everywhere. Just as sudden, a wave of souls appeared, walking the foggy pavements in droves. Toward the square. My eyes were blind with tears. I could not talk and I couldn't even breathe. Small groups at first, cold, shivering, making jokes about the rain, the cold, and the wind. A van full of U.S. Marines arrived. Full dress uniform and weapons. They disembarked nervously, took their place of honor on the outdoor stage. The wind was up high. The flags held tight before I led the Pledge of Allegiance. Joe got the outdoors loudspeaker working. A Marine sergeant roared, "Change, huh, read, land, huh." I spoke into the mic. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Our mother opened, concerned about war and working for peace. Our rabbi spoke for all who believed in God. Our priest gave an impassioned talk about Mary suffering while watching her son die on the cross. It was fantastic. Our minister was even better than our priest, talking about the courage of our brother Yeshua dying for friends. Finally, the song was sung by what sounded to me like celestial angels singing with more reverence than I'd ever heard in any cathedral. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Candles flickering in the wind, covered with paper cups, everyone singing. There was not a dry eye in the house, or the square, I should say. Oh, God, did we cry. I never cried so hard. It wasn't what the national news media would call a really big crowd, but it was enough. Jody Pinto's daughter counted the candles at the end that were burning. She reported in awe. There were 241 candles burning at the very end. 241. I responded, "We equaled the peacekeepers who died," with tears flowing, lips quivering into the microphone. Then as the final, I quoted a saying I had heard so many times and seen over our hatch at Paris Island DI School. Let no man's spirit ever say, this drill instructor did not do his job. Good night. God bless you all. Thanks for coming. Public reaction was modest, but expressed best in Bill Frank's column the next morning. He must have written all night and submitted it. Here it is, word for word. Headline, News Journal papers. Shame on those who forgot to remember. Shame on you loudmouth, brazen-headed, anti-nuke protesters for failing to jam Rodney Square Tuesday night. Shame on you noisy peace advocates for failing to show up in large numbers in Wilmington to memorialize the United States Marines whose lifeblood was needlessly shed a year ago. Where were the state and local officials Tuesday night? Absent, or perhaps just indifferent. Tommy Little, the father of a Marine, persuaded 3 clergymen to participate and a Marine detail to be honor guard, plus a bugler to sound taps. More than 200 men and women were on hand. It was all done with exquisite restraint, yet was so significant in making us think back upon the dead and why they died. The Marine rifle salute echoed through the square, but the most touching time came when the bugler played taps and hundreds of candles flickered in the night wind as the wind tried to blow them out. As far as I know, this was the only memorial service of its kind in Delaware, maybe in the nation. And if not for Tommy Little, October 23rd was just another day. Good grief. We get statements galore from the governor, from the lieutenant governor, directing our attention to Hot Dog Week, Mind Your Manners Week, Hoorah for Fried Chicken in Delaware Week, but a day to remember the Americans who died in Beirut? So what? The preceding day, United States, or USA Today published a column. It went national. Can They Be Martyrs for Peace by Thomas L. Little, an attorney and ex-Marine, ending with, Pat came home in December, but he's heading back there now after training in the desert warfare, house-to-house warfare, anti-terrorist tactics. He and hundreds of other young Americans wait off ships, just off the coast of Lebanon, wondering what will happen next. We're joining other concerned citizens tomorrow night in lighting a candle for peace here in Delaware. We're holding an outdoor service of mourning. We're going to turn the politics of war into the politics of prayer. We're going to take the heroes of war and make them martyrs for peace. This was printed in USA Today, October 22nd, 1984. Thomas Little was the guest columnist. We did it, Jane. We each saw one candle, one guard, and then one button. We proved 2 or more are gathered together. Oh well, you know the rest. A local Catholic newspaper, The Dialogue, never reported the story. Organized religion was not very organized that day, but it was their wonderful former editor that I met at a woman's retreat weekend, called the Corsia, that arranged for the USA Today column. And, oh, by the way, that very, very morning, the day of the service, I was hand-delivered to my home an official White House proclamation in beautiful official envelope. And reading from the proclamation, it is another piece of my tale I save for my grandchildren. October 23rd, 1984, a time to remember all the victims of terrorists throughout the world, and only mentioning our 241 heroes from Beirut. It was hand-signed by Ronald Reagan, Bill Roth, and Joe Biden. It was a bland PR wiggle, but at least it was a wiggle, and I got a wiggle out of them. Not long afterwards, the congressional political process caused the 241 names to be added to the Vietnam Wall. I never mentioned this proclamation to anyone after it arrived until I just read this on camera and wrote it in my book. And the next chapter is chapter 26.